Hello YouTube and welcome to another Elder Scrolls lore video. Today we're talking about the fall of the Dark Brotherhood and the events that led to its downfall in the 4th era. The Dark Brotherhood sanctuary that we encounter in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim is actually the only official one left by the time of the 4th era, and the reason as to why such a glorious and vast network of assassins disintegrated into mostly just one measly sanctuary will be explained in this video. Before we delve into the main reasons and events that led to the Brotherhood's downfall, I need to explain how their disintegration even began. At the end of the 3rd era, the Dark Brotherhood's presence in the predominantly human provinces was still somewhat solid, but its presence in Cyrodiil was still partially crippled due to the Oblivion Crisis and the events that transpired in the Dark Brotherhood questline in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, where the Brotherhood lost a large part of its leadership and the new listener, the hero of Kvatch, eventually disappeared after the events of the Shivering Isles. As the Cyrodiil branch of the Dark Brotherhood slowly started to recover in the early 4th era, the Brotherhood was hit with a lot of misfortune, and then later in the era the Great War commenced, and as we all know, the Great War crippled and brought destruction to many of the human provinces of Tamriel, High Rock, Skyrim and especially Hammerfell and Cyrodiil. They all suffered heavy damages due to the sheer severity of the war. And this degree of chaos allowed for many insurrections and riots to start within the cities and countries of these provinces, not to mention how major political players were using the war in order to target unwanted factions, one of these unwanted factions being the Dark Brotherhood. Even before the war, the Mede Empire had presumably been hunting the Brotherhood, using the Penitus Oculatus, essentially the Empire's CIA/Secret Service, to hunt down their members and trying to find sanctuaries to destroy. Because we know that the Dawnstar Sanctuary, which we occupied during the events of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, was actually forcibly abandoned during the 1st century of the 4th era, meaning that even then the Brotherhood was facing very tough challenges, presumably including them being hunted by the Penitus Oculatus. All of this tension burdened the Dark Brotherhood greatly, with sanctuaries in Bravil, Bruma and Chedanal all taking on a lot of pressure from local riots in Cyrodiil, and other sanctuaries across Tamriel being raided by the Imperial Penitus Oculatus forces. The Brotherhood's presence in Hammerfell fell first, as the sanctuaries there were all presumably destroyed, either by riots or by the new Hammerfell government, or maybe even Imperial Penitus Oculatus, which were maybe still being allowed to hunt the Dark Brotherhood by the new independent Hammerfell government, depending on how political relations were at the time. No matter how the sanctuaries got destroyed, these sanctuaries' loss was a huge loss of influence and power for the Dark Brotherhood, them having to relocate surviving members of Hammerfell and losing control over an entire province. Their subsequent loss of power and control came with major setbacks, as they didn't have the resources to keep up important facilities such as the Shadowskill training facility in Archon in Blackmarch. This facility was abandoned, and with its abandonment the Shadowskill tradition began to wither as well. If you want to know what shadow skills are, they are highly trained and highly skilled Argonian assassins, on whom I'll have a video for you next week, so stay tuned for that. And if you are here a few weeks after the upload date of this video, then that video will be in the description of this video. So check that out if you're interested, or stay tuned depending on when you're watching this. So if you want to know more about the shadow skills. So, in the year 186 of the 4th era, the sanctuary in Bruma was besieged and completely eradicated, leaving almost no survivors. This started an even bigger trend of loss, as all remaining sanctuaries across Tamriel started to suffer similar fates. And by the end of the year 187, a very bad year for the Brotherhood, only 4 sanctuaries remained in all of Tamriel. These were the main Brotherhood headquarters in Chedanal in Cyrodiil, the Wayrest Sanctuary in High Rock, the Corinth Sanctuary in Elsewhere, and the Falkreath Sanctuary in Skyrim. During this time, Cicero in his journal complains that it's becoming harder and harder for the Brotherhood to hold up the illusion of being able to be everywhere at once, with contracts in Hammerfell, Valenwood and Blackmarsh becoming harder and harder to complete due to the lack of sanctuaries and lack of members. It was also during this time that the Black Hand, the leadership of the Dark Brotherhood, was basically fighting over what to do with the Brotherhood, either try to expand again or try to consolidate, and it seems that in that fight, amongst themselves they lost valuable time, as the Brotherhood would fall even further later. But the 4 sanctuaries that remained after all this time seem to have been the toughest ones, surviving many of the Imperial hunts and riots. But how did all of them eventually crumble, so that we are only left with the Falkreath Sanctuary? While during the Elder Scrolls Legends storyline Fall of the Dark Brotherhood, a merchant by the name of Uther Nir hired the Forgotten Hero, the protagonist of the Elder Scrolls Legends, to infiltrate the Dark Brotherhood and lead him to the Listener. Uther claims that his motivation for this task was the fact that his own daughter killed her mother for the Brotherhood and got recruited by the Listener herself as a result, and that he wanted revenge on the Brotherhood. Soon enough, the Forgotten Hero infiltrated the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary in Wayrest, and through a series of assassinations, earned the trust of the Brotherhood. As said before, during this time the Dark Brotherhood was really yearning for new members as their downfall was becoming very apparent, so getting in wasn't very hard. As time went on and the hero was undercover in the Dark Brotherhood, in the year 188 of the 4th era a fleet of Corsair pirates attacked the city of Wayrest while the hero was still undercover in the Brotherhood. During this massive pirate raid of the city, they laid waste to a lot of the city of Wayrest and the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary included. On that day, when the Wayrest Sanctuary was lost, the Black Hand, the leadership of the Dark Brotherhood, decided that the Corinth Sanctuary in Elsewhere would also be closed, and that all its members would be relocated to the Chedenal headquarters of the Brotherhood in order to bolster their strength in Cyrodiil. With these events essentially happening at the same time, the Dark Brotherhood lost major control over both High Rock and Elsewhere, having to vacate both provinces in a desperate act of survival as their members were lost over the provinces due to all of the misfortune that I told you of before. Due to the destruction of the Wayrest Sanctuary, the Forgotten Hero and Uther plan to infiltrate the Falkreath Sanctuary next, knowing that they'll welcome the survivors of the Wayrest branch with open arms, as even there they had problems recruiting new members. At first, nothing really significant happens during the hero's stay in the Falkreath Sanctuary. But once there, the hero does meet the current listener of the Dark Brotherhood, who decides to visit the sanctuary in Falkreath. The current listener is called Alessandre Dupre, and I personally really like her. Anyway, as becomes apparent during your contracts in Falkreath, there's a traitor amidst the Brotherhood members in Falkreath. Alessandre then gives you the opportunity to find out who the traitor is, which the hero uses to gain her trust. Once the traitor has been taken care of, Alessandre realizes the hero's potential as an assassin and then offers him to accompany her in Bravil, where the Night Mother's crypt is located. They return to Bravil to find that two rivaling skooma trafficking gangs are waging war against each other on the city's streets, and due to the political state that southern Cyrodiil was in during this period, the direct aftermath of the Great War, southern Cyrodiil was left largely uncontrolled by the authorities, because it was during this period that the Thalmor were likely removing their forces out of the region and the Imperial forces were moving back in after the signing of the White Gold Concordat. That, in combination with a shortage of Imperial forces directly after the war, because a lot of them had been slaughtered at the Battle of the Red Ring, means that there wasn't as much control in the city, so skooma trafficking gangs could go wild. But as most Oblivion players know, the crypt of the Night Mother herself was located below the Lucky Old Lady statue in Bravil, and the statue was unfortunately destroyed in the gang war soon after Alessandre and the hero entered the city. During all of this, Russia, the speaker of the Chedenal Sanctuary, sent two assassins called Garnak and Andronica to assist the listener in Bravil. During all of this, the hero's original employer who had them investigate the Brotherhood, Uther Nir, appears in Bravil and asks the hero to meet him in secret. After learning that the listener is also in Wayrest, Uther asks the hero to lead him to the listener so he can finish the job and end her. Alessandre, on the other hand, has learned of his presence in Bravil and went on to explain to the hero how Uther is her father and that she swore to kill him because he murdered her mother. Now, when Uther and his mercenaries are led to the crypt, they start pillaging and burning everything. Both Andronica and Alessandre are killed during this skirmish, and the player can choose to either help Uther kill his daughter or protect Alessandre. Regardless, Alessandre dies at the hands of her father, and the crypt of the Night Mother is destroyed in the process. Although Garnak was heavily wounded, he managed to evade the mercenaries and evacuate the Night Mother's coffin. He transported the Night Mother in her coffin to the Chedenal Sanctuary and told of the horrors that transpired in Bravil. At that moment, the Brotherhood was without a listener, and this worried the members gravely. They proceeded to wait for the Night Mother to speak to someone and name a listener so that new contracts could appear. But after 2 months, she still didn't seem to pick anyone. This made people very impatient, seeing as how the organization around them was slowly crumbling further and further. The speaker of the sanctuary, essentially the leader of the sanctuary, then revived an ancient tradition which allowed for the appointing of a keeper. A keeper would be responsible for the sole upkeep and protection of the Night Mother, something that usually was done by the listener, but since there was no listener, a keeper had to be appointed. The Black Hand chose Cicero for this role, and it would be up to him from that point to care for the Night Mother's remains. And from this point forward, Cicero slowly descended into madness. Before his role as keeper, Cicero was an assassin for the Chainlaw Sanctuary. He seemed capable and composed, showing a certain degree of ruthlessness that every good assassin possesses, but still very much sane in the mind other than that. Cicero committed himself to the role that he was given, and even more time went by before more problems arose. Russia, the speaker and leader of the Sanctuary, claimed that the Night Mother finally spoke to him, yet he was unable to confirm this by saying the binding words, which were the words that were taught to every listener and keeper. This uncovered Russia's blatant lie, and with Cicero's insistence, Garnack then killed Russia for his betrayal. With Russia dead, only Cicero, Garnack and Pontus were left as members of the Chainlaw Sanctuary. Pontus eventually died at the hands of some common bandit while roaming the streets of Shadenal, and soon after, Garnack supposedly left the sanctuary in search for supplies, but when the 3-month mark passed, it was clear that he just disappeared or died. This left Cicero as the last Dark Brotherhood member in Cyrodiil, and alone with the Night Mother. At this point, his sanity dwindled quickly, and he accepted the personality of some jester that he had assassinated before he became the Keeper. His duties towards the Night Mother forced him to flee the Chainlaw Sanctuary, and he contracted Astrid from the Valkyrie Sanctuary to announce the Night Mother's arrival to Skyrim. Now, throughout the Dark Brotherhood questline in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, we learn of Astrid's fatal jealousy and lust for control once the player is named the Listener. Angered by the fact that she had to abdicate from her own appointed position of power, leads her to informing the Penitus Oculatus about the Emperor's assassination attempt. As expected, this was a direct betrayal of the 5 tenets of the Dark Brotherhood, the creed of the Dark Brotherhood, and she eventually suffered the same consequences of her actions when Commander Morrow went back on his word and raided the Valkyrie Sanctuary. Anyway, some members do survive, and you help them relocate the abandoned sanctuary in Dawnstar if you chose the path for the Dark Brotherhood, and the player then can choose to rebuild the Dark Brotherhood sanctuary in Dawnstar. But this might not be the definitive outcome, as the player can also join the Penitus Oculatus and kill the entire Dark Brotherhood when you're in the sanctuary. Still, there is an out for the Dark Brotherhood, as the Dark Brotherhood can still rise after Skyrim, even though it has been destroyed, as there are no active sanctuaries left if you join the Penitus Oculatus. Because even when you raid the sanctuary, the Night Mother is nowhere to be seen, because if you raid the sanctuary with the Penitus Oculatus, then the Night Mother never arrived, because Cicero hadn't arrived yet. This means that the Dark Brotherhood could still rise from the ashes and start anew, considering how the Night Mother would still be intact with Cicero, even if the sanctuary was raided before Cicero's arrival. In addition to that, several members aren't even there when you raid the sanctuary. The Dark Brotherhood fell from grace by the time that we encountered them in Skyrim. They went from a far-reaching empire and a network of assassins across the entirety of Tamriel to essentially just one misguided sanctuary in the forests of Valkyrie. But even then, as long as the Night Mother endures, so will the Dark Brotherhood. So we'll likely see them in the Elder Scrolls 6. And that is the story of the fall of the Dark Brotherhood. Quite the interesting story, if I say so myself. A quick mention to my friend Zith, who helped me research this video. He also makes Elder Scrolls lore content on his channel, so be sure to check out his channel for more lore stuff. It's in the description of this video. And if, after all of this, you are still up for some more lore videos on my channel, I highly recommend checking out my video on Cicero. It's in the description of this video and in the eye icon of the video right now, if I'm correct. That said, either look forward to or watch the Shadow Skill video, depending on whether you're watching this. And now, before I end things, allow me to vocally mention my top Patreon supporters: Mr. Bernardo Binda, Gabriel Binda, Polarized Putin, Sar Mikhail, Sword of Bushido, and Mr. Christmas. These amazing people, along with all the others on screen, keep this channel alive, and for that I am very grateful. That said, I will see all of you in the next Elder Scrolls lore video next week. See ya!